And yes, no consent. They should just vote for Mickey Mouse because that would be hilarious. The House of Mouse shall rise. To start to talk about today is, of course, none other than the repeated failure of Kevin McCarthy to reach becoming House Speaker, because this is a ton of information. It's what everybody's going to be talking about for like the next 2 weeks. And we have done a deep dive into all the things that have happened over the last 4 days. And we hope it gives you a perfect look and encapsulates everything that is going on, because we want to be your go-to source for this. We want to be your go-to source for news such as this. So let's go ahead and get started. We are now officially done with day 3 of the Republicans' internal fight for speakership. And after 10 votes, the most failures of any speaker in over a century, McCarthy is still not speaker. So let's recap what's happened over the last 3 days, why Congress hasn't officially started, and why we still don't have a House Speaker. First up is why Congress has not officially started. Well, sort of. According to congressional procedure, the 118th Congress has begun. It is simply in the process of dusting itself off, cleaning up a bit, and getting its affairs in order to start anew. A bit of spring cleaning and rediscovery, if you will. Here are where things get messy, though. Technically, the House is empty as is not chosen a speaker, and the speaker conducts the swearing-in ceremony. Furthermore, without members, the House cannot approve its own rules, nor proceed with the American people's business. Truly a state of legislative limbo. This half-conscious state has left members bewildered. Are retired members still beholden to ethic rules? Missouri Republican Billy Long wondered the same thing. Speaking to the Washington Post, Long stated that, quote, "Let's say a friend of 30 years has a condo in Aspen, and they've told me for 12 years, hey, anytime you want to use our condo, go ahead. Let's say I checked into their condo for free. I thought I could do it, and now I'm told, wait a minute, you can't take any free stuff." There are rumors about congressmen who had big jobs lined up the day they were out of Congress, which should have been 12 o'clock yesterday, being Tuesday. Did they sign deals for 7 figures yesterday to become lobbyists, or did they not? While we can debate about and rail against the rampant corruption, both soft and ever-present, that happens in Congress and what to do about it, the uncertainty behind his words are palpable. Will any of these congressional representatives be brought up on ethics violations? Probably not, but the worry is not unwarranted. Continuing on, Ken Buck, Republican of Colorado, explained to the Post that he believed the House exists, but is in this kind of state of disarray. After all, members went to the floor to elect a speaker. However, how do we get a speaker? Buck suggested that Republicans adjourn, meet in the basement away from the cameras, and hammer out a deal. He said, quote, "I don't know if alcohol will help or if we need to bring in a plate of Colorado brownies." I mean, smoke-filled rooms are historically the place to be. This does beg the question, though. Why are Republicans in disarray and unable to elect a speaker? Well, as we covered last week, 13 Republicans signed a letter blasting Senate Republicans for not blocking the omnibus spending bill. Members of this group, as well as a handful of others, have been vehemently against McCarthy throughout the last 3 days. The question is then, what exactly are their demands? What is preventing them from voting for Kevin McCarthy for Speaker? For that, we will now turn over to some of those members' own words to figure out just what the hell is going on. First up, we have Scott Perry, Republican of Pennsylvania.
Not really interested in talking. Once we get a very slim majority after we were told there was going to be this huge red wave, well, then the conversation got a little interesting. But even so, what do you...
So what he says here, he's talking about the fact that, like, until it seemed like there was this really narrow majority that was going to happen, Kevin McCarthy wasn't wanting to hear the Freedom Caucus. He's one of the members of the Freedom Caucus. And that is pretty troubling. Not really. Actually, it's based. Like, screw the Freedom Caucus. They're a bunch of bomb throwers that don't matter or anything, right? But that's where they are. But let's go ahead and continue on with what Perry is saying here.
What do you want? We said, you're the guy that wants to be speaker. Tell us, if you want to earn our vote, how we're going to transform this place so that there's a different outcome for the American people. Tell us how you're going to do that.
Okay. Let's pause him right there. Actually, let's not pause him right there. Let's pause him right there. There we go. Okay. So so it should be obvious here that this is not what you do during a negotiation from their side. Well, from anybody's side. What they're essentially trying to do is that they're trying to make the other person blink and reveal what they want in order to get a deal done. The Republican Freedom Caucus, the Unfreedom Caucus, whatever the hell you want to call them, didn't want to tell McCarthy what exactly they wanted. They have a ton of leverage here, and it's leverage that they are using. And we'll talk more about that in a bit. But McCarthy saying, no, you got to tell me what you all want, what will get your vote, is actually the best move that he could make in this situation. The reason being is that it puts them on the back foot and starts the negotiating process with them coming to the negotiating with a demand that can be countered with something a little less than what they might actually take, because they are having to actually go out and make the first basically concession in this. But there's still more he says here. This clip's about 1 minute and 26 seconds, and we're going to have multiple clips in here. So let's continue on, though.
Nothing. So finally, he said, put something down. I want to know what you want. So we did in the beginning of December. And even at that point, there were people that said, I will not vote for Kevin McCarthy.
They wouldn't vote for him regardless of what he said. We're going to talk more about that as well. But that is what is going on here. They didn't want to give Kevin McCarthy speakership because they're bomb throwers.
I'm still working to try and avoid this moment that we're at right now, the whole time. And so that's one question you should ask yourself. Instead of saying to these folks that are standing with me, why have you brought us to this point? Well, we surely haven't come here alone. There's one person that could have changed all this. All right? So we send the letter, you see the letter, you see what's in it, and we start working on some things. And in trueness and fairness, some things I think on the germaneness and single subject, I think we got to a decent place, but it was like pulling teeth, and it took 3 weeks.
Of course it was. Of course it was.
And none of the other stuff was being worked on during that period.
That ends this little segment because we got other stuff to talk about. And to answer your question, no nonsense, I think I understand what you mean here. So no nonsense says, whenever you get a chance, what does it mean when they say that these negotiating House deals are on paper? Are they somehow binding in the rules of the House? No, they're not binding on the rules of the House. But when they say that it's on paper, it means that somebody has signed to it. And so they have something that they can go to and say, hey, look, there's actually this agreement that's being done on. You should be comfortable voting for McCarthy as speaker if this is your threshold. That's what they're talking about there. All right, but we have to continue on. So the letter that Scott Perry is talking about was released on December 9th. In the letter, Scott Perry, Republican of Pennsylvania, Dan Bishop, Republican of North Carolina, Paul Gosar, Republican of Arizona, Andy Ogles, Republican from Tennessee, Chip Roy, Republican of Texas, Andrew Clyde, Republican of Georgia, and Ellie Carney, Republican of Arizona, made numerous demands. Those demands included the following: a motion to vacate the chair, 72 hours before vote on a passage of any bill, which means giving members of the House 72 hours before a vote is to be held, bills that only consist of a single subject, no leadership involvement in primaries, more conservative chairs and rules committee members, meaning more conservatives on the rules committee, even more staunch conservatives, no raising the debt ceiling unless there's a plan to cap spending and balance the budget in 10 years, no embracing of earmarks being things added to bills for members' districts. Use must-pass bills like the National Defense Authorization Act and the Farm Bill to check Biden's administration. In other words, put some things in there that are, generally speaking, no deal goes kind of things that Republicans want, but make them be passed because of these two very important bills to two large constituents in the United States. And then finally, form a church commission style committee to target weaponized government. And here they are talking about the government as in the IRS, the DHS, the FBI, everybody they've been complaining about over the last 2 years who have gone after Republicans. Now, as you heard Representative Perry say, McCarthy made a good faith effort on some of these demands. Well, others were not met. As of Wednesday evening, these concessions included proposals to reduce the number of Republicans it would take to force a vote on ousting the Speaker to 5, creating a select judiciary committee to centralize investigations into the executive branch, limit bills to a single subject, and make it harder to waive the germaneness rule for amendments. The germaneness rule is one that is not obvious and requires a little bit of explanation. To put it simply, amendments to a bill in the House are supposed to be directly related to the bill itself. However, interpretations of this rule and the ability to waive it allows things not related to be added, allowing wheels to be greased to get legislation passed. This is something that some Democrats could get behind, but does slow down the legislative process. Yet these concessions were not enough. Which of these remaining demands does the group feel most strongly about and is keeping them from voting for McCarthy? For that, we will turn first to Lauren Boebert, Republican of Colorado, and then to Matt Gaetz, Republican of Florida.
So I've said from the beginning that my hard line was the motion to vacate. Single member motion to vacate. You cannot demand more responsibility and less accountability. And Kevin McCarthy. Okay,
so the single member motion to vacate, we're going to talk about it a bit, but there's already been concessions on this, as we said above, which is a 5-member to vacate the role. This is really stupid. It's just dumb. It doesn't surprise me that the most craven, freaking media-obsessed congressional members are pushing for this because they want to go over to their base and be like, look at me, I'm doing the things you want. And, you know, virtue signaling bullshit, okay? So it shouldn't surprise anybody. It should surprise nobody that Lauren Boebert is part of this act. This is part of her thing. Well, let's let her finish. There's only about 30 seconds left.
Was taking the path of Nancy Pelosi and following her precedents with the motion to vacate. We were just told when we left this door.
So the reason she's bringing up Nancy Pelosi is to try to stain him with the Republicans' hatred of that woman. They hate her for 2 reasons. First is probably because she's been very effective. She was able to outmaneuver Mitch McConnell, able to outmaneuver Kevin McCarthy, able to outmaneuver many Republicans to get legislation passed. Second, Republicans really don't like women in power. They just don't. They especially if those women do not ascribe to their worldview about where a woman's place in the world should be. They're okay with somebody like Lauren Boebert and other Republican women being in Congress. It gives them an air of credibility about how the Republicans are actually for, equality and all this other stuff. But let's be real. If there's a woman that's very powerful and is trying to go to get more power, a lot of people are going to be against that, both Republican and Democrat, but especially among Republicans. It's just how the worldview ends up tying into evangelicalism and a whole bunch of other stuff. So that's part of the reason why that's happening.
We will give you single member motion to vacate. Just today, that was the starting point for negotiations. That was the starting point to everything that we are wanting to transform the way Washington, D.C. operates.
Before we move on to listen to Matt Gaetz, I want to point out here that I believe the reason members are pushing for a single member vacate call is to replicate the Senate's filibuster. The single member vacate call would effectively be a sort of Damocles over the entire legislative process, and again, slow it down to a crawl. I think we are beginning to see a theme here. But now let's move over to Matt Gaetz and see what he has to say.
Those of us who will not be voting for Kevin McCarthy today take no joy in this discomfort that this moment has brought. But
they
if
do.
you want to drain the swamp, you cannot put the biggest alligator in charge of the exercise.
Sir, I'll have you know that my good colleague from the state of California is a giant alligator that is part of the reason why we are all here today. Sure, Matt Gaetz, Florida man, we understand what you really are doing. You're playing up to your base and seeking that ever-loving dopamine hit.
I'm a Florida man, and I know of what I see.
Boom!
We offered Kevin McCarthy terms last evening that he rejected. We sought a vote in the first quarter of the 118th Congress on term limits. He refused. We wanted a budget from the Republican Study Committee that balances on the floor in the first quarter. He refused.
Okay, so everybody should refuse a balanced budget amendment. At least any balanced budget amendment that is done quickly, and I would say quickly meaning more than 20 years. And the reason for that is that every single dollar of deficit that the government does is one more dollar that circulates in the economy and helps lead to growth. Despite what people tell you, government can spend growth into existence because money is just kind of sitting there when it's not being used, and it has inertia, and velocity of money matters to the growth of the economy. And by putting the money into the economy and increasing money's velocity, the speed at which it changes hands, that actually leads to growth. It's why the economic impacts of the Supplemental Nutrition Program, or SNAP, are like for every dollar that's spent in the SNAP program, about $1.75 of economic activity is generated. Don't be fooled. This does generate economic growth.
We wanted the border plan that the Texas delegation put together on the floor. He refused.
That border plan we will look at in depth in a essay comment, in an essay video, probably within the next 3 or 4 weeks or so. There's a lot of stuff there that needs to be discussed, and it's going to be something that is going to be a lot of Republicans are going to latch onto, and so that deserves its own show.
And it is true that we struggle with trust with Mr. McCarthy because time and again, his viewpoints, his positions, they shift like sands underneath you. Even
Yeah, and I mean, that's what a politician is, bro. That's even what you're doing here. Let's be real.
Kevin McCarthy's own mentor recently said that the lies always change.
That's pretty
McCarthy
funny, though.
is not only responsive to pressure from the right. Time and again, he has failed to achieve the goals that we seek on spending and on the fight. For months, we have been asking Mr. McCarthy for his battle plan. How do we ensure that we stand up for folks in the military who feel like they're being purged?
So that right there is talking about the fact that military members that refused to get a vaccine were kicked out of the military for failure to follow lawful orders. You can say what you want about whether you think the vaccine is something that should be mandated or not. The fact of the matter is that anybody that refuses to take the vaccine is showing that they don't trust the military and therefore can't be trusted to maintain good order and discipline. It's one of those situations where even if you want to say the vaccine is bad and you shouldn't have anybody take it, which is wrong, which is very wrong. The COVID-19 vaccine is actually very good. You should be able to understand this argument and be like, yeah, okay, I get it. Like, if you were a member of the military and this happened, why would you want to stay in anyways? Like, I don't get it. Like, I've gotten back. I was in the military for 7 years. I got vaccines that were way more dangerous than the COVID-19 vaccine. That includes the smallpox vaccine for when I was stationed in South Korea because of North Korea's panache and potential for biological weaponry, as well as I didn't get it again, but if I had not gotten it when I went to South Korea, I probably would have had to get it prior to going to Afghanistan. That is something that is way more dangerous than a COVID-19 vaccination, and it just needs to be stated. So, but we're going to continue on. We're going to let him finish. Only about 20 seconds left.
How do we ensure that if there is the passage of a farm bill, it includes things like work requirements?
So this bit here, work requirements, is talking about the SNAP program that I just stated. They want to make it to where unless you're working, you can't get SNAP benefits. Whatever, like, It's food. People should eat. Like, a person that's hungry can't go out and get a job. It's just stupid. And as we already said, it generates economic activity. It's bang for the buck. So that shouldn't be something they go after, honestly.
All we got was a handful of howdy and a mouthful of much obliged. So we do not want to be here at this moment. We would prefer to have a unity of purpose, but we will not continue to allow the uniparty to run this town without a fight. There's very little difference between Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah, and of course he's going on with there's very little difference between Nancy Pelosi and Kevin McCarthy, which is just stupid. It's just dumb. I don't know. And anybody that says that is just playing to like the based, like not based in a good way, but the basis of nature of their political base in order to drum up some sort of support and be like, yeah, he's right. It's just dumb. Continuing on though. Now you've heard it directly from the horse's mouth. Term limits, a balanced budget, motion to vacate, and border security. What we are seeing here is an emboldening of the populist right within the Republican caucus, specifically because, at least for now, they have leverage. As of Thursday, January 5th, 2023, McCarthy has agreed to additional demands. Political reports that McCarthy has agreed to the one-member motion to vacate rule, has agreed to 2 seats on the Rules Committee that determine which amendments can be added to a bill, has agreed to changes to the appropriations process that would stop another omnibus spending bill, and a vote on term limits. Some have said he's given away the House to his detractors. Yet it appears that these concessions were not enough. Why is that the case? Well, one reason could be that the majority of the Freedom Caucus members do not get their power from accomplishing things in Congress. No, they derive their power from splashing across people's screens on Newsmax, One America News, and viral social media posts. Say what you will about the death of the Reagan consensus, but it's clear that that old canard that government is not the solution, it is the problem, is still alive, and the Freedom Caucus is rewarded for following it in many aspects. Due to this, they are sharpening their axes to take out any establishment member in order to get more clicks, more money from their base, and the ever-present dopamine boost. They know that they have the power, as we will see in this next clip.
Even having my favorite president call us and tell us we need to knock this off, I think it actually needs to be reversed. The president needs to tell Kevin McCarthy that, sir, you do not have the votes, and it's time to withdraw. With that, I yield. Thank you.
Holy crap, man. That's ridiculous. So we just saw Boebert tiptoeing around the fact that she thinks Trump is actually out of touch. That is a pretty big deal, and maybe foreshadowing things to come. In fact, the populist fervor has some of the left pining for similar vapid, self-serving, virtue-signaling bullshit of their own. They are lamenting that the squad, and it is always the squad, wonder why that is, couldn't be anything, right? Did not do the same here. These groans of, why can't we do this as well, is epitomized by the tweet from Brianna Joy Gray. So, quote, "It's interesting to think that had squad members forced the vote, they'd be giving speeches nominating different progressives and using the opportunity to speak to the public about popular progressive policies and political corruption that keeps Congress from acting." Sure, buddy. Sure. What Gray referred to in her tweet was the pressure campaign against members of the Progressive Caucus in order to force a vote on Medicare for All. They wanted progressives to withhold their vote from Nancy Pelosi, similar to what the Freedom Caucus is doing for Kevin McCarthy. The move failed, and it failed hard for a number of different reasons. We may cover all those reasons in a future essay, but it is suffice to say for now that its demise was baked into the makeup of the Democratic coalition. Pushing for the public option burned Democrats and was at least partly responsible for their loss in 2010. Ultimately, though, most members of the coalition want to at least to appear to govern competently. These sorts of petty squabbles show weakness and sow division within a conference. This fact is not lost upon Republicans. We will now turn to Kat Kamick, Republican from Colorado's remarks from her nomination of Kevin McCarthy for further insight.
We must choose to lead in the face of a liberal Senate and Obama's JV team in the White House. We owe it to the American people. The American people sent a conservative majority to govern this body, but we cannot even begin to govern because, heck, we can't even swear in as members of Congress.
So, as we stated earlier, the Freedom Caucus doesn't care about governing. They're being called anarchists by some of the more establishment Republicans within the House and Senate, and there's other writings on the wall there as well. But what it really boils down to is that these people are rewarded for slowing down the process because of the Reagan canard. However, most people want to see the government do things to help out the country. And if a party is being hamstrung by a small group of individuals that are hell-bent on preventing any help from going out to the American people, well, that party is going to be seen as weak and feckless. And that is what she's talking about here. But let's let her continue on.
I've traveled the country for the last 2 years as the youngest Republican woman in the 117th Congress, helping to secure a majority of members who are on both sides of today's Republican vote. Diversity of thought is a good thing. It's one of the things that sets us apart from our friends on the other side of the aisle. Yes, diversity of thought is a good thing.
So this is actually a pretty good attack line from a Republican, because there are members of the Democratic coalition, both officially within Congress or within the party itself, the party apparatus, as well as those outside of it, lay people, rank and file people, that do want to see a quote unquote Tea Party from the left, such as Brianna Joy Gray, and saying, hey, this diversity of thought's actually a good thing. We're actually, sussing out our issues. We're hammering them out. We're hammering them out, right? It's also kind of a callback to like woke politics, where we don't care about diversity of thought. We only care about diversity of looks and whatever else, identity politics, right? Which is why she's making this comment. It's both. It's a twofer. It's like, hey, I can play to my base and also jab you from the center. So it's a good thing it's a good thing for her to say. Completely disingenuous. Like, it completely ignores the fact that throughout the entire 2018 through now Democratic Party caucus, there has been internal fights on various magnitudes. It just happens that for the first time in a while, the circling firing squad didn't kill all of their members. Didn't outright kill all of their members and cause them to lose overwhelmingly numbers. So they're showing a form of unity right now because there's no downside to this unity that they're showing. It makes the Republicans look very weak. And that is what she's talking about here. But let's let her continue on. There's more that she's going to say. And there's some things that are pretty scuzzy.
But they want us divided.
Yes, we do.
They want us to fight each other.
Yes, I do.
That much has been made clear by the popcorn and blankets and alcohol
delicious.
that is coming over there.
Okay, so she's laughing about the alcohol comment, and I'm going to come back to the main screen here to talk about this, because I think it's a thing that people that aren't super online like I am, or like maybe some of you all are, or at least don't like kind of get into the muck to fight Republicans, are actually necessarily aware of. That jab was a jab at Nancy Pelosi, because these people think that Nancy Pelosi is an alcoholic. I don't know if she's an alcoholic or not, okay? But that is what that was about. And it is frankly disgusting to talk about somebody's addiction, even if it is true, because that is something that a lot of people suffer from. And it's not anything to be really trifled with. People that are addicted to alcohol or any other substance need help mentally and spiritually, whatever amount of help they can get in order to beat their addiction is going to be a good thing. And that shouldn't be something that people should make light of. Make light of people's inability to, like, I don't know, kick a football or something. I don't fucking care, right? Just, you shouldn't make fun of somebody for, being an addict. It's just, it's not entirely, it's not their fault. When you say entirely, it's not their fault that they're an addict. They need help. A lot of people have issues with addiction, and it's in poor taste. It really is. And besides all that, there's no indication whatsoever that Pelosi's an alcoholic. None. Maybe she got drunk at one party, like, or something, and that's where it all comes from, but that doesn't make her an alcoholic. Do better. Let's let her finish, though. Well, let's listen to these boos, too. Look at that. She's
The
so
House is
glib.
not in order.
There. Boo. So what's happening here is that a lot of the members are like, hey, you're not in order, right? And the rules of decorum are technically not not in play because the House is technically not in session yet. I mean, not officially. There hasn't been any rules made for the House, for the 118th House. So this is all just like, whatever. And what you kind of hear in the background there is the fact that some of the members are like, what decorum rules, what rules, like none of this is actually matters right now because the House hasn't voted on the rules, hasn't approved them. So there's technically isn't any rules governing our actions right now. But we have to continue on. The things that you said here are not wrong. Democrats have taken to social media to troll their Republican colleagues for failing to govern. This tweet from Ted Lieu is a perfect example. Flash it over real quick. About to go to the House floor with my popcorn. Very minor troll, but very good and effective there. Democrats are in fact winning this messaging battle. The deeper the Republican division and the longer the fight for Speaker drags on, the more Democrats gain. Some conservative influencers can recognize the warning signs and are doing their part to try and stop the hemorrhaging, as we can see in this clip from longtime friend of the show, Sean Hannity. All right, there we go.
Is your final choice for Speaker? And if you can't get more than, let's say, 30 votes, will you follow your own advice that you were asking Donald Trump and withdraw?
So this is harking back to the comment of like, Donald Trump should tell McCarthy to withdraw, blah, 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 whatever. But listen to this. Listen to this here.
There are certainly names that are being floated around. And hey, maybe I should nominate President Donald J. Trump tomorrow. But Sean, I did watch your show last night.
Is this a
and I
game
want to
show?
set
Like
the
we're going
record
to
straight
pick
on this motion.
Is this a game show? Look at Sean Hannity's face here. Just look at it. Look at it.
No,
pick Jim Jordan
Listen,
one day,
I wanna
Donald's
set
the other day,
motion
Trump the
straight
next
on
day.
This motion to vacate because he did.
So that's fun, right? Right? Like, we can see what's happening here. Can't we? Can't you? The Republicans are actually seeing the writing on the wall. Because you could actually hear the frustration in Hannity's voice as he tried to understand Boebert's endgame. But he isn't the only one throwing their hands up. We'll turn now over to this clip from Fox News' The Five program to see more.
To Groundhog Day, America. The Speaker's stalemate on Capitol Hill showing no signs of stopping, and it's unclear who will blink first. Republicans are locked in a fierce battle over who should hold the gavel. The House taking a break until 8 p.m. after Kevin McCarthy lost his 6th vote for Speaker.
So this happened yesterday. We were on vote 10. He failed his 10th vote. And yes, no one said they should just vote for Mickey Mouse because that would be hilarious. The House of Mouse shall rise. But let's let the five talk about this because it's funny and it's got a lot of good information here.
Speaker. Republicans backing him say enough with the nonsense. It's time to move forward so they can go after Joe Biden.
This 20's gotten together and decided that they can not only blackmail the Republican conference, in effect, they're blackmailing the American people.
There's headlines about the chaos.
So as much as I hate Newt Gingrich, he was 100% correct there. Because as long as the House cannot actually start session, all manner of things that happen cannot continue. So people can't get their briefings about what's going on in the world, their intelligence briefings. People can't start setting up bills to fund the government next year. They can't do things like pass emergency disaster relief. If another winter storm suddenly hits the country, where's the money going to come from to pay for it? There's not going to be any. FEMA will have to tap into like emergency funds and play around in the gray area of what executive authority allows to happen. Like, this is no joke. There's real potential here for devastating fallout that will affect millions of people's lives. I'm not trying to be alarmist. I'm really not. I think this can go on for like a week or two without any major thing, specifically because the House, the previous House and Senate got together and passed the government funding bill until the end of the fiscal year, which is next October, or this October rather. But God, if they hadn't been able to do that, could you imagine what would be happening right now? Hate to think of it. Well, let's let the rest of these Republicans talk about their stuff.
Us, this and that. Yesterday, our colleagues on the other side of the aisle were tweeting their bags of popcorn that they had out.
Delicious.
They love it.
I plead with all of my Republican colleagues, let cooler, more rational heads prevail.
I've had a number of conversations with Kevin and just basically told him that at some point this needs to break loose. He either needs to make a deal or he needs to step aside and give somebody else a chance to do that.
No,
but
not
the 20-plus
aside.
Republicans who oppose Kevin McCarthy aren't giving up.
I think the path is very difficult right now for Kevin. At the core of this is, yes, we were successful in taking back the majority, but we still have to deal with the realities of governing here in Washington. And a 1-day delay or a 2-day delay, even a 3-day delay, does not stop us from being able to do the things that we were elected to do.
So Donald here is not incorrect. I think if this only goes until the end of the week, not going to be that big of a deal. People will forget about it. America will move on. There won't be this like huge, destroying thing that is going on, right? But it does make the Republicans look very weak. And with that, delicious. Let's continue on, though.
And the Democrats smell an opportunity. AOC thinks the Republican infighting could potentially open the door for her party to gain some extra power.
And she's not wrong. This next part, I don't think AOC should have actually said any of this publicly. I don't like the fact that she's talking about it out loud because it means that it's likely not going to happen. If it was being held close to the chest, maybe it wouldn't be a thing. Oh, that's interesting to know. No On Sense. That No On Sense heard that next week some staffer funds will run out. We'll have to look at that. But as I was saying about AOC, I don't think she should have said this. And the fact that she did means that it's likely not going to happen. But let's listen to what she has to say.
Is there anyone in their caucus that can build that consensus? If there isn't, McCarthy's team may have to come to the Democratic Party.
Ooh.
And if that's the case,
this is interesting.
Then what would that even look like? Could we get Democratic chairs of committees as a result? If he chooses to approach the Democratic caucus, then that would be a negotiation in and of itself for potential coalition government.
All of this. AOC is really...
Okay. So before it moves on to this next segment, which happened at the end of the clip that we took this from, let's talk a little bit more about this AOC thing. So if McCarthy approached Democrats, he would go through Jeffries. He would go through the minority leader. And one of the things that is a possibility is that maybe they would agree to not having necessarily a lot of power, but they would agree to have things happen that would stop negative, harmful things from happening into the United States. The two biggest that I can think of that I think that Jeffries would agree to for this and would be a, hey, it's either this or we're not helping you at all kind of thing, right? Is that first up, not allowing the debt ceiling to actually come to pass. What I mean by that is actually raising the debt ceiling as soon as it's approached, instead of playing political games and brinksmanship with it. Having that off the table would be huge for American stability, economically, and its global position. The second thing is ensuring that in October, a bill is passed to continue funding the government. Maybe it won't be as large as Democrats would want it. Maybe some things would have to be cut. But it wouldn't be as drastic of a cut that would happen outside of this coalition government, so to speak. Those are the two big things I see him demanding. Some more minor things that I could see him demanding would be something along the lines of any kind of, committee that is investigating Biden has to be bipartisan to a degree. They did it with the Trump investigations. They reached out to Republicans and asked, hey, we trust you all to do this. We're just not going to appoint these two people. And then McCarthy and his people said, no, it was either those two people or you're not getting anybody. And therefore, Democrats had to go to who they went to, Kissinger and Liz Cheney. I could see Jeffries demanding that as well. That, hey, hey, fair is fair. We understand your politics. Here are the two people that we want on the committee. Or here are 5 people, let's say, 5 people we want on the committee. Pick 2 of them. And he could agree to that. And it would be people that Jeffries would know that McCarthy and maybe some Republicans wouldn't necessarily be 100% opposed to, but not 100% agree with either. I could see that being part of this. But there's more for us to cover here with AOC's thing, especially coming from Republican influencers. Let's go back over to the video and watch what is being said here.
All of this. AOC has really gotten in line. You notice even how she conducts herself in interviews, the people that she talks to. I mean, I've seen from the coverage of what's going on the floor, she's talking to more Republicans than almost any other Democratic member of the House, right? Not going particularly far with Matt Gaetz or Paul Gosar, for instance, but
yeah, so that's important here. It's one of the things that a lot of Bernie-crats, Nina Turner followers, the ultra progressive, the Tea Party of the left people don't like about AOC is that she actually is trying to become a polished politician. And I don't mean polished as in fake. I mean actually learning how to play the game in an effective way that leads people to respect her more and also leads to progressives making wins. And that's why she's been talking to people like Paul Gosar. That's why she's been talking to people like Matt Gaetz. That's why she's probably even talked to Kevin McCarthy about, hey, maybe some of the squad could get on board with some of the things that your caucus is wanting to vote on, because we agree with some of those populist proposals as well. I know a lot of progressives want to see term limits instituted. I don't personally agree with it. I think it's dumb. Okay. Now I'll do a full video about why it's dumb at some other time. But it is true that there are progressives that could get on board with this. And so if she's like, hey, we can vote for you, keep these positions, and just, put us on these committees, that would be a win for progressives. It would be a win for AOC. That's what we needed to say there. But with that, will we see a masterful play by Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez alluded to save McCarthy? Maybe after Republicans squirm a little more. But the chances of that happening after AOC has announced that possibility to the world may be smaller than we would all hope for, as previously stated. Regardless, I think it is safe to say that the drama we have seen over the last few days does show a deep division within the Republican caucus. These decisions aren't going to be solved by another night of bargaining and a dozen or so pizzas. And of course, we got a video for that as well. So apparently this pizza chain is actually really good. It's called Wise Guys Pizzas. So if you're ever in DC, hey man, there's about 24 pizzas right there. It's got to be good for something. Thought that was a little fun clip to show y'all. Nevertheless, as much fun as it's been to see the Republican infighting live in 4K, it does reveal to us a deeper issue with our institutions. We're going to be getting serious here. Because once again, we are seeing that a mere willingness to adhere to norms and civility have underpinned procedural order and democratic integrity. A republic, if we can keep it indeed. There is not a mechanism in place to ensure that someone ascends to speaker, and the House cannot function without a leader. Speaking on the condition of anonymity to the Washington Post, a House procedural expert put it best. Quote, I think more people need to be aware of the institutional damage that's going on here. If one of those branches is so hamstrung, so paralyzed, as it is right now, do we really have the 3 equal branches of government that our Constitution has set out? The foundation of our democracy appears to have some cracks in it. If we want to see this grand experiment in democracy continue, we will have to fill these cracks and mend these broken walls. If members of Congress refuse to follow norms, we must ensure that they follow the rules and that those rules are strong. For that, changes are necessary. I am not being an alarmist. I believe our democracy can certainly handle a few days of discourse. But can it handle a month? A few months? Other forms of government have rules in place to ensure that the governments continue to function when procedural order breaks down over politics. Perhaps we should institute similar rules here. We should also think about how much power individual members of both the House and the Senate have, either procedurally, such as the filibuster, or what the Republicans are getting out of McCarthy with its one rule vacate, or from their positions such as Speaker or Majority Leader of the Senate. We should all agree, even people that are allies of the Freedom Caucus, that government is the people's business and that business must be done. Failure to conduct it does harm us all.